Over the phone is how you told me you still love me, and I'm still kicking myself. But what I said to you, I told you I'll be over soon, I'll be over soon. Can I look at you without a care in the world? And that sad look that you bear when you think there's no one there.
Good morning, welcome. My name is Tailinh Agoyo, and this is Rise and Thrive on Usula Media. I'm here today with a very special guest, Ramón Cruz. Ramón Cruz is the president of the Sierra Club Board of Directors. He is an environmental policy and advocacy expert with extraordinary experience in international policy, sustainability, transportation, urban planning, environmental stewardship, and climate change. Ramón Cruz also happens to be a very long-time friend of mine, and I'm so happy to see you. Thank you for making the time to spend this hour with us, Ramón. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks so much, Tailin. It's great to see you. Great to be here with your audience, and yeah, it's amazing how many years I was trying to count, and it's several decades. I don't know if you want to disclose.
Several decades.
But yes. So great to see you again, and yeah, always great. You know how much admiration I have for you and for your family as well. Your father, your mother, everybody. So.
Yes, I feel the same about you, and so happy to see you because it's been several years since we've seen each other in person. But you're joining us from Brooklyn today, is that right?
That's correct. From
very beautiful where you are.
Sorry?
It looks very beautiful where you are.
It is. It is my backyard. I guess in the border of Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights. But yeah, as you know, I come from Puerto Rico, so I guess you know, I have always been back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So today we have a lot to talk about, and we'll see if we can get through it all. First of all, congratulations on your role as Sierra Club board president. If you could share with us the role that you play at Sierra Club and how you came to be elected the board president, that'd be great.
Well, as you know, the Sierra Club is the largest, one of the most influential organizations, environmental organizations in the country. Has 128 years of history. That yesterday, coincidentally, I mean, we didn't quite plan it, but it was actually a very good timing in terms of basically starting a process of re-examining that that our long history that definitely has so many successes in terms of conservation of nature and just being part of the environmental movement in general, but also that it's not absent of trouble and harm caused to so many communities, especially indigenous communities all around the nation. And so we're starting a process of re-examining that, and we made the association with the whole pulling down the statues of the Confederacy that is going all around the nation, and it's part of that. So within that a legacy that it's from and history that traces back to John Muir and many of the first conservationists in the country. Well, it's great that the Sierra Club elected the first Latino president, in its long history, and I'm very honored and humbled by that. The Sierra Club, we have nearly 4 million members and supporters around the nation, and we have 64 chapters, that often are able to go deep into local issues. So it is a very complex, big organization, and so the board of directors is the sort of like the decision-making body that that it's elected nationwide among all its members, and so from there, from that board, then gets elected the president of the board. That, of course, it's together with the executive director, is often the face of the organization in many aspects, in many regards. Yeah.
Right. So I want to back up to what you were talking about, the blog posts that there was the first blog post released yesterday. And so you're saying that that wasn't a planned timing, that this had been that you had been working on this for a while and the timing just happened to coincide with what's going on with world events?
Oh, no. I mean, I meant timing with your show.
Oh, I see.
You know,
Okay. Okay.
that because there has been like a flood of media inquiries, all over, especially I would say in the West Coast, where the figure of John Muir is,
Got it.
all over in national park, in state parks, in beaches, in schools, in everywhere. So it's only responsible to be inquisitive also, and re-examining history, but the timing, no, that the timing was definitely triggered by this way that it's basically going through the whole nation in terms of introspection of its our institutions, of our organizations, and then see where the systemic racism and the white supremacy structures that our country was built upon, and starting to tearing down some of them. So in terms of that, even though the process in the Sierra Club didn't start yesterday and did it start with this wave, it's certainly catalytic towards that.
Okay.
I would say that it has been already over a decade, if not two, that the Sierra Club, since basically the environmental justice movement came about in the 90s, again, practices and protests that have been going on for decades and decades, but came to like materialize into a movement in the US in the 90s. And, a little after that, also that movement began, questioning where the bit larger environmental movement, or the national environmental movement, was in, and so that's where Sierra Club started, like adopting environmental justice policies and adopting the HEMES principles for democratic organizing, and starting like doing stuff like in 2016 we asked the National Park Service to rename the lodge in Yosemite, that it was named after Joseph LeConte, that was one of our founding members, or early leaders, because he was also one of the founders of the University of Berkeley, but also a proponent of eugenics. So we don't want to have be associated with such figures, and I won't say John Muir would have been Joseph LeConte. It's two different people, but of course everybody is very complex and have history. In the case of Joseph LeConte, he was his family were slave owners. They lost their plantation after the Civil War, and then migrated to California and had sort of like a new career there. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't racist, and we don't want to be associated with that.
Mm-hmm. So can you detail for our audience first I'd love to talk about the HEMES principles. If you can describe them and talk about why they're really important to implement. And also, how would you define climate justice or environmental justice for people who really don't, this is not their area?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. You asked first about the HEMES principles. Should I go EJ first?
Are they kind of connected? I mean, I believe they're connected, right? So
it's connected. I would say.
Answer the second question first. That makes sense.
Well, in terms of EJ or environmental justice, or EJ or climate justice, that those are. I don't wanna get in trouble with any other proponents or academics, but basically is the notion that the environmental justice movement came about because for during the modern environmental movement, I would say modern in terms of, because again, if we go 128 years ago, when we were founded, we would have, the movement was about preserving natural landscapes, when the extractive industries were all over the place, forests were being depleted, indigenous populations driven out of their lands because of that, etc. And also because of the creation of national parks, we must say. But then I say the modern, basically the last 50 years, when the first Earth Day came about, and there was a movement to basically install all the basic legal framework that protects the U.S. And with that, many places in the world followed our lead, and also we followed other places lead. No, like in Europe, for example, this has been done for even longer. No, but anyway, that movement that was created 50 years ago, you had it was progressive, it was liberal, but it was also very wide, it was wealthy, and so sometimes that movement, in order to be able to pass quicker legislation nationwide, etc., was not very receptive to very local issues, and so you had communities that for years had been fighting, all a coal plant, or mining, etc. I mean, you have indigenous communities that had been doing it, for such long time, when it comes to environmental justice, like the Navajo Nation, in their fight with against the Peabody coal, and then suffering from excessive poverty and lack of access to running water, electricity, etc. So it's those all injustices in terms of how it affected low-income communities of color, that became then, the gathering of all these protests and small, struggles being, harnessed, group that became the environmental justice movement. And we still see, right now during the pandemic with the COVID-19, how it affects those communities much more, and it's also because of their environmental degradation. It's also because of their lack of access to good health services, etc. That it's much more than just the particular struggle. No, and climate justice then, I guess, came a bit after the whole climate movement emerged. And for example, during the 2000s in the US, there was a big bipartisan push to establish a market a system of emissions trading using market economy principles to try to lower US emissions. But the big environmental organizations push for that on a national level, and that happened at the expense then of local struggles, because basically if you have if you push for a national scheme where you can trade emissions, that means that some areas will have more pollution than others, even though the overall emissions of the nation will go down. So the climate justice movement, basically opposed to that principle, because they don't want to be the ones being sacrificed for the good of the nation, and so that is, very linked to, what one of my colleagues, Bob Hopkins, made a great article that I would say that, you should all Google it. It's called "Racism is Killing the Planet," and basically, has the principle of the notion of, the climate crisis or environmental degradation has it's built. I mean, it happens with the notion that some areas can be sacrificed, that we can basically deplete some areas or frack, gas from some mountains, because that is what we sacrifice in order to have progress. No, and so you cannot have areas that can be sacrificed without having the people in those areas then being disposable, and you cannot have disposable people unless you have racism and white supremacy in this case. No, so that's why we have to tear down white supremacy and the culture of systemic racism in order to advance the environmental movement. And yeah, that is part of being, why we're here, I guess, today.
Thank you. That was a great explanation. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get to the HIMIS principles. This is Rise and Thrive with Tailinh Agoyo on Usula Media.
I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. And even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. I have a mentor, Maria, and she convinced me to continue my education. Just never judges. She's a true role model.
From the depths of my heart, I thank you, Maria, for being a friend and a beautiful person. No one receives a diploma alone, and I'm honored to share this moment with you. Thank you.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
And it's alright with me, it's alright with me, it's alright with me, and it's
Welcome back. This is Tailinh Agoyo on Rise and Thrive on Usula Media. I'm here with Ramón Cruz, who is the president of Sierra Club Board of Directors. Thanks for joining us today, Ramón. When we left, we were talking about climate justice, environmental justice, and you were about to explain what the HIMIS principles are and how they started and why they are a priority for you.
Well, yeah, so again, the HIMIS principle came about by the same groups that push for that larger environmental justice, that they were able to get an environmental justice executive order under Bill Clinton. And in 1996, one of the engines behind the movement, the Southwest Network for Environment and Economic Justice, gathered in the city of Jemez, and they crafted this series of principles that basically was like a guide, some guidelines for organizations like Sierra Club and other organizations that often mean very well, but because of their power and size, sometimes may not have been, may have or not being conscious about how they interacted, and an organization like the Sierra Club, descends into or parachutes into a local community because they think it's right, but may not be as sensitive to many aspects. So the HIMIS principle is basically guidelines on how to do that interaction right. So it's there are a series. I think it's 17 or 14. Well, but it's basically series of concepts, from, be inclusive, to emphasize, bottom up organizing, let people speak for themselves, work together in solidarity with the local organizations, build just relationships among ourselves and everybody involved, and commitment also to self-transformation. So so those are, again, a guiding guidelines to then interact and be sure that we're engaged and in democratic organizing, rather than do a microcosm of what is imperialism otherwise.
So have you seen a shift in your work and the people that you work with as a result of these principles?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it's something that we focus on training our staff and our volunteers. I would say that, of course, is by no means perfect because, human beings are not perfect. So it's a process and it's a journey, and facilitation and organizing takes time to develop. So, we're in that journey, and I'm proud that we are in that journey. But we're going to have, of course, many. We will make many mistakes along the lines, and I hope that communities as well as ourselves, hold ourselves accountable in that journey and that work.
I think that's something that I saw either in one of your articles or your posts where you said, please hold us accountable. And I think what you're saying about going forward, and we're going to make mistakes because we're all human, but we're trying, and these are the things that we're trying to do, and we're listening, is really an important point. And it's really wonderful to see what you've brought to Sierra Club, and those statements you make, just here and there, I see these statements that you make, and there's so much wholeness to it, and so much like bringing together of people, instead of saying, no, this is my way, or this is the way we need to, this is the way you need to do it. That whole listening is it's so refreshing and wonderful, everything that you've brought with Sierra Club.
Thanks, and thanks for that support. Of course, I mean, I want to say that, of course, I'm not bringing in. I bring it with my experiences as well.
Yes, but you're communicating that, though.
As part of my journey, I happen to be here at this time, but this line of work started, before. I'm not the first person of color to preside the Sierra Club. Aaron Mayer came, in 2015. Alison Chin was in 2010. So it's a process, and I'm certainly again proud and humble that I'm giving this opportunity, but it's by no means only me bringing it. I'm as an engine towards that as much as I'm a consequence of the struggle of many people that came before me.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that as well. Yeah, I that's Ramon. You're just you're just such a good person. Okay, back to our conversation. I want to talk about the Climate Action Summit. Did you find it meaningful? And I know at that time, I would see you talk about, the way the Trump administration was handling climate change, and they're just so negative and destructive in the messaging that they're giving out. How did that correspond during the timing of it, correspond with the Climate Action Summit, and how was your experience there? Did you find it meaningful?
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to clarify also for the audience. Do you mean the Climate Action Summit last year at the UN, at the United Nations?
Yes.
Okay. Because
several. Right.
There has been several climate action summits. There has been, many. Of course, every year there's the Conference of the Parties to the Framework Convention on Climate Change. That it's basically where the Paris Agreement was developed. I would say that it's important not to look at them just as one specific event, and more of a continuation of a struggle. No, so because, for example, in that particular climate summit last year, when Greta Thunberg arrived by boat to New York, and there was definitely a momentum. We didn't know that less than 1 year later we would be in a pandemic with an economic crisis worldwide that may change things in uncertain ways. It was definitely meaningful in terms of the Secretary General of the United Nations posed seeing that things had stalled on the Paris Agreement in a big part because of the Trump inefficacy. I don't know. The whole administration is a disaster, but in particular, in terms of climate change, announcing that they would come out of the Paris Agreement and basically dismantling all the systems of all the legal and regulatory framework of the laws that protect us and that where so many communities have hold on to. So he started, but there was a ripple effect with similar countries, similar authoritarian regimes, like, for example, in Brazil, or I would say in Russia as well. The Chinese, that the Obama administration have brought them to the table or had a mutual understanding and interest in pushing this forward. Also, they're doing way more than the US is doing, but why would they want to expose their whole economy to do this if you have an administration like in the United States that it's not going forward? So yeah, it's very harmful. And in that particular summit, when he showed up with Vice President Pence, it was so childish, so unnecessary to be there just to bother everybody. Mm-hmm. So he had nothing to do there, where the whole world was celebration. Basically, all these countries setting up new goals, private corporations also basically saying, developing new commitments. I worked a lot in the transportation one, where you had the electrification of fleets from different cities, commitments from different cities, and from big shipping and freight corporations going forward. That was the aspect that I was working on in particular. But it's it's just over and over how this administration has no regard for the environment, and also for global cooperation and multilateralism. So all these things, again, for many people sounds like a lot of blah blah blah, but the reality is that unless you have that, multilateralism is always much better for the world, to be communicating, to be able to work together for common goals. And so the fact that the Paris Agreement happened, for all the people that criticize it, it's almost a miracle that something like that could have happened. It's almost impossible, and there's nothing like that. It's unprecedented in the history of the world. Think of any agreement, international agreement, that has happened in the past is usually as a result of a war or a trade negotiation, where you have countries with much more power and countries without, and the winner will set the tone for the agreement and the other one will abide to it. The Paris Agreement was really the first and probably only negotiation where you have everybody or almost everybody on board with and often with very contradictory opposite goals. You have Saudi Arabia that produces, where 90+% of their economy is all based on oil, and they're basically saying, well, if we abide to this, our economy is going to crash. So with other islands that are basically starting to disappear already. So all those people go together and sign this is almost impossible. And so we have to save it as much as we can, because otherwise, if the world doesn't communicate with each other and it's not involved in this, the result is going to be more inequities and war as well.
Right. Thank you. So we're talking about the world, but if we can bring it back to like state and city levels, and there's a lot of climate initiatives on the state and city levels. So how does that, what progress have you seen in that sense? And how has not having the national support of the government, of the administration, affect moving forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would go back maybe to the Bush administration that was so also very lax in the environmental regulations, but not as damaging as the Trump administration. You know, back then, basically, when you had then the federal government not interested in investing in any of this, you had a switch to then work at the state level and city level. And those levels are the most important ones, especially the city, because ultimately is where projects, can be implemented and where the real, the things are happening. And so it is very important, for people getting involved in local politics and local issues, because that's where ultimately things can happen. So in the Bush administration, a lot of attention happened at that level. At the during the Trump administration, you have that same momentum to work at the local level, but the country is so divided that then you have basically the Republican Party has become like complete deniers. That back in 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you still have Republican states or cities still working for it. I guess the Trump rhetoric has made such damage that now you don't even have the possibility of under the Republican Party to do that. Unfortunately, because I mean I believe in multiplicity of political parties to really push things forward. I'm not saying the answer is then only have Democratic Party, because they have not been saints at all, but definitely and then you have the Trump administration and the federal government that was created under the Constitution to enable this kind of efforts and to coordinate and basically work together with state governments to push things forward and to move us forward, then being the obstruction and being so it's not only that like in the Bush that it was like more of a at that level, I mean, created a lot of damage, but it was passive in comparison to right now how aggressive everything is to dismantle everything. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a lot of negativity? Do you feel like there's also a positive shift? Do you have hope?
Sometimes difficult to maintain it, during these times. But that's why the Sierra Club committed, so many resources. And of course, COVID-19 has had to shift some of the way that we did organizing and be active politically. But for, we basically made the biggest investment we had done so far, getting into our reserves and everything to be able to stop this, because otherwise there won't be any environment to protect in the future. So we see this definitely by far as the most important election of our lifetime, and so that gives me hope, in terms of when I see the younger generation being so clear, in terms of what the goals are, what the issues are. And actually, sometimes people criticize young people for being this, idealist and all that. And in this case, they're much more realistic about what's happening. And it's the older, population that it's talking like some nonsense and denying science and, things that are so, of course, when I see, all the climate strikers, etc., being so moved and being able to express everything so clearly, that gives me hope. The issue is more like, do we have time for that? And that's a difficult part. In general, I love that phrase from Martin Luther King of the arch of the moral universe, that it's long, but it bends toward justice. And the issue here, as Naomi Klein, has explained so well, is that long arc in under climate change is not so long. And so, are we going to be on time for that? Your kids' generations are able to then try to fix the mess we have left.
Right. I'd like to take a break, and when we get back, I'd like to talk more about your travels. So we're going to take a break.
I swore I heard a smile in your voice. I heard a smile over the phone. Is how you told me you still love me, and I'm still kicking my own bell. And it's alright with me.
Hi, we're back on Rise and Thrive. This is Tailinh Agoyo. I'm here with Ramón Cruz, who is the president of the board of directors at Sierra Club and a very wonderful longtime friend. So I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy that we get to have this conversation. I could go on for hours because we just need to catch up, but we're not going to do that right now. I have a question though. Yes. I read you have a wonderful blog post. Is that what you're calling it, on the Sierra Club? Ramón writes articles on Sierra Club, and definitely check that out, sierraclub.com. There are some incredible
.org.
What did you say?
sierraclub.org.
sierraclub.org. Sorry. Yes, thank you for the clarification. There's some wonderful articles on there, so definitely check those out. But you travel so much. I mean, you're on the plane all the time. But one place that really stood out for me was when you went to Alaska, to Gwich'in homelands. And I'd love you to just talk about your experience there, meeting with Indigenous people and how they're trying to protect their Indigenous sovereignty, in spite of all the push to do a lot of drilling in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, where to start? It was really one of those experiences that it's almost life-changing. So the Sierra Club has been part of a campaign in partnership with the Gwich'in Nation that has been basically fighting this push for oil exploration in what is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And so I had the opportunity and the privilege to visit the Arctic village and then raft all the way through the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge all the way to the Arctic Ocean. And basically we encounter only 4 kayakers in like 2 weeks of doing that during the migration of the porcupine caribou, that it's that for ages have been traveling thousands of kilometers from the place where they pass a brutal Arctic winter to the flatlands of what is now the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And they do that it's amazing to see them. We were not in the middle of the whole migration, of course, staying out of it, but we could encounter hundreds of them nonetheless. And they go to these nesting grounds that it's not only where they calve there, but so many other species use those. I guess because of the food, because of the protection, and the Gwich'in that has been, basically their lives intertwined or interlinked with the porcupine caribou for millennia, called that place the place where life begins. And it's so sacred for them that they would never even approach that area to especially during the time when when they're calving, because of they know how special is for that balance. And so to see all that, it was very humbling, and just raises the need, to protect this. And then for decades there has been, again, like a push for start oil exploration there. And we had been able to um, to contain that, and to be able to push back until the Trump tax reform, where they put it not as a single issue, but they basically embedded it as part of the tax reform. So basically, the federal government now it has been wanting to open the reservation, the wildlife refuge, for oil exploration. And I must say, I mean, and that gives me hope, with very little success. Let me change inside, because I see that my battery is starting to run out. But yeah, and also it's kind of drizzling here in Brooklyn. But yeah, part of the issue then is, when they did that, our strategy completely changed, and then became okay. There, you can see me now, right?
Yes,
Still?
perfect.
Okay. Then our strategy changed to then become much more focusing on the institutions that finance such oil exploration. And so far, we have had a lot of success with most of the major U.S. Banks and financial institutions basically saying that they're not going to finance any oil exploration in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So that gives me hope. And of course, again, this is not a battle that the Sierra Club has fought alone. Many other organizations, especially the Gwich'in Nation, that has led all through, and it's very inspiring. And being there, eating, dancing with them, etc., was an amazing experience.
It sounded like an incredibly powerful experience, and interesting that talking about being in Indigenous community and what they're and looking at what many Indigenous communities are trying to protect. What do you? I wanted to ask you about. There's a photo of you that I actually put in the flyer for and came to reporter, but behind you there's a land with a sign that says "Listen to Indigenous people." So, connected to what we were just talking about, what does that mean to you when you see that? And yeah, just tell me what that means to you and why you think it is important.
Yeah, I mean, it was a coincidence. No, that was in the climate strike that came before that climate action summit that we talked about before. But of course, it's great that that happened to be to be carried by, I guess, what I perceive as a white man.
Right.
But very important, very relevant, especially for me now that we embarked in this journey that we were talking about earlier, in terms of re-examining history of the Sierra Club. Because again, like all the wins that we have had, even some of the great places that we have fought so much to save, were also a result of of great harm caused by relocation of indigenous populations. So even Yosemite, that it's so emblematic, and was we were able to preserve it. And when John Muir and our founders, arrived there, arrived to a depleted area that needed to be saved, but that was also, conquered with a lot of suffering, from indigenous populations. So it's something that we need to go back to that history and expose it, not only so that it doesn't happen again, but that it's also welcoming to other communities that traditionally have not been part of organizations like the Sierra Club, and that for so many years, organizations like mine had been complacent from a system that was full of exclusion and inequalities.
Yeah. So we only have a few minutes left, but I'd really like to talk about action items that people can take going forward, especially because the election is coming up. What are some suggestions that you have that we can all do out here to make things better?
Sure. So, most importantly, get involved right now. Again, I cannot stress more how important this election will be. It's in everybody's lifetime. Hopefully, this is the most significant election. And I'm saying hopefully just because, if there's something worse, it's basically, we're fighting now for survival. We're fighting for survival of so many places that we cherish for so much, so many things that we fought to gain. When you had in the 60s that river, water that caught on fire for days and days, because of basically all the pollutants that are there. And the Trump administration basically dismantled or weakened the Clean Water Act so much that now we don't know, what might be in the water that we're drinking. When you have instances, like Flint, Michigan, and that if that happens now, there's nothing to hold on to basically to fight back. And so this is a matter of life and death for so many people. So I would say, volunteer, put up time in your local organizations. I will talk, I guess, about our efforts at the Sierra Club just because that is what I know, but by no means is the only one. Of course, we have, chapters in all states, including Puerto Rico as well. And so, get involved. But I would say, a few things. We have, for example, Sierra Club independentaction.org, Sierra Club independentaction.org, where you can join. And we have, for example, yesterday, a writing letter party at night for people to come on Zoom and share experiences. But in the meantime, you get all these letters that you can personalize and then send to voters. We have already sent more than 1 million. And so write text, write letters, make phone calls. We have the infrastructure to do that. Donate to support such networks if you don't have the time. And of course, then send it to other people in your personal network so that they can join. We have a lot of distributed organizing efforts of live streams, phone calls, texting, emails, and we're going to be very active in the Get Out the Vote. So basically the few weeks before November, please volunteer. Of course, we call COVID-19 and all the responsibilities.
How does that work with the COVID? Are you not going to be on the ground? You'll be doing everything virtually?
For the most part, we were hoping that we were going to be on the ground by now if people and governments and the federal government would have taken it seriously. But now we see that there was a fear of a second wave of COVID coming in the fall. Now we're seeing that we're not out of the first wave because of that irresponsibility. So I think, the most important part, and, for those people that master more the legal trades and being lawyers, etc., be Democratic Party is really recruiting as many people. There's a lot of fear on how many things the Trump administration will do to steal this election, and it's an election that we're not going to see the results right away, even if there is a sweeping. We're shooting to have the largest majority gap of a popular vote. Unfortunately, that record holds it with Nixon in 72, and it's over 17 million. We want to have a larger margin than that in this election. And so we need people to be very active to help with that.
Okay, those are our instructions. Thank you so much, Ramon, for joining me on. I know this is an extremely busy time for you, and I appreciate your knowledge and expertise and your friendship. So thank you for being here and sharing with us today.
Well, thanks to you. It was great, and great to reach your audience.
So this is Rise and Thrive, Tailinh Agoyo on Usula Media. Join me next week when Julia Martin will be on talking about her artwork and the power of wampum. Yeah, have a good day, everybody. Be well.
Just one more time in your